Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to another episode of my Road to Chess Mastery. Today we are going to be going over game number 2 in tournament number 13, I believe. And this time we are playing with the black pieces, and this is a rematch. This was a bit of a throwback, as this was against, my opponent was the first person to ever beat me over the board. And, of course, I have improved a lot since then. That was about a year before this, maybe even a year and a half. And now I'm trying to come out on top. And let's see what happens. We see d4, as now I'm playing with the black pieces. They played with the black pieces last time and played into a Caro-Kann, which is an opening I'm now playing with black against e4. But I played knight f6 and e3, g6. e3 isn't really too ambitious. Normally you'll see c4 trying to gain central space, but e3 is a modest move. The problem with it is you can't really play bishop f4, so that does cause some issues, I guess. g6, knight to f3, bishop to g7, and bishop to e2. Castles, castles. So this is just a normal position, just a d4 opening, and it's just going to be about either slow positional play, or if things open up, maybe things get crazy. Things can, always. But then my opponent plays after d6, b3. And this immediately, my spidey senses were tingling. I had to play c5. When you see a move like b3, it weakens this diagonal. So c5, if they were to take, then knight e4 immediately wins the pawn back. But it also has a lot of threats of its own. So this would be beneficial for me for sure. But after bishop to b2, c takes d4, e takes d4, and d5. I'm just trying to say, okay, we have an imbalance. I have the c file, you have the e file. Let's see what happens. After c4, I played knight to c6. I'm not really too scared of them taking, because after takes and knight takes, they have an isolated queen's pawn, and these are positions I was very comfortable to play against, because the ideas are quite simple. You, trade off as many pieces as you can, and then the d pawn is just a huge weakness. And obviously prevent the move d4, d5. But, okay. Knight to c3, b6. I need to develop this bishop, and I thought it would be necessary to develop on this diagonal instead of the other one, this one. And I think I made the right call here with b6. After rook e1, I actually played a different move, and I played bishop a6, and this was a little interesting. The whole point is, after takes, I take and I attack their queen, and so they have to defend in some way. And after they defend, let's just say queen takes, knight takes, takes, and takes. Well, everything is defended, but I was able to get a queen pawn position where it looked like originally maybe there's a tactic to win material here, because they're attacking both my bishop and my knight, but unfortunately this will not work out for them, because now I play against an IQP. Again, our position was comfortable to play. Now, I'm not saying it would be better for white or black in that resulting position. What I'm saying is I really, really enjoyed, and I felt very comfortable playing and beating opponents against playing against an isolated queen's pawn. But there are obviously situations where it could be better, but there it was chances. There was chances for both sides. Let's continue. Rook to c8. I'm just ignoring the bishop on a6. It's not in any danger. Bishop f1 and d takes c4. So I actually had a threat, which is interesting to say. But this move is it's a bit difficult to deal with, because all of a sudden, I'm trying to win a pawn here. Let's see how. After takes, there is possibilities of maybe taking, but in this position, I think maybe a move like knight to a5 simply will just cause a lot of issues. And c5, I simply just take and then take. And of course, there might be bishop a3 in the end, but even then, okay, we're up a pawn. But this is just like one of the ideas I had in the position where I just play knight a5 and I target the c4 pawn if they were to take back. Knight e4. And knight e4 really surprised me, but I think it was the right move. This does give them an isolated pawn, and how I do this is by playing the move. Maybe you can see it. I don't want to spoil it, but I will have to because it's my next move. It's the move c3. And the whole idea of c3 is if they take, then I just take on b2. And they don't have time to take because I promote, and then I take, and I'm up a piece. So this would not be good for them. So the move c3 is very concrete in the fact that it just trades off these pieces and doesn't allow b takes c4. Very important. I was going to lose the c pawn anyways, but here I lose it in a favorable way where they're stuck with an isolated pawn. Knight takes f6, bishop takes f6, bishop takes c3, and bishop takes f1. King takes f1, and I played queen to d5. I think maybe even e6 makes a lot of sense. Just remaneuvering to the d5 square. Which, yeah, this is something I would probably prefer nowadays, because the second you get to d5, especially with the knight, it becomes very, very difficult to hold these positions because the knight's so strong on this square. But instead, I played queen to d5, and I still have these ideas of e6, but I was just trying to improve my piece. And I saw the move knight to e5, and I played a not such a good move here. I took. I saw that I could get into an endgame, and I was happy. Braden sees endgame, Braden happy. Simple as that. but I don't think this was right. I really don't. This lets them take with the pawn, and now they don't have any isolated pawns. But okay. You know, this position can still get interesting after takes and bishop g5. But realistically, I'm not really too sure what's going on anymore. It doesn't really make too much sense why I went for all of this, but I think my argument was that the e5 pawn was a little overextended, and I think that's a fair argument, but the rooks are still on the board, and that makes things a lot more complicated, because if it was just bishops, sure. The pawns are definitely a bit overextended, and it's pretty easy to bring my king up in this position. Imagine if no rooks were on the board. I can get my king to e6 quite easily, and overextension might not be too difficult to prove. But, of course, that's a long way away, and I don't think I should give myself that much credit, because realistically, that wasn't a immediate possibility, and that's not forced in any way. Bishop d2, I took. Of course, they can't take back immediately because I win their rook, so they take on c8, and then they take on d2. And I thought I had more activity here. Maybe I do, but they always have moves like rook to e7 coming soon. Even maybe an a4 followed by rook to d7. But here, I don't know why I was happy, but I felt a little happy. And then I saw f4, and then I got a little scared. I ended up playing e6. I thought this was maybe necessary. I was a little bit scared of an e6 sacrifice. So let's just say a random move, h6, e6. The sacrifice kind of scares me because even though they gave up a pawn and we are up a pawn, it's also a rook endgame, and these are big targets for the rest of the game. And this is a permanent weakness of mine. And if I push, well, then I push, and this pawn is going to be a consistent target. And they can pretty much draw the game immediately with this. Well, I guess I have rook a2, but even still, I defend the pawn, check, and draw. But okay, e6 just prevents any e6 from them, so I thought this was necessary. But it also kind of blocks in my king a little bit, because it's harder to find a way out, because this rook is so well placed. King f3, king g7, g4, and h6. I don't know, maybe I was scared of g5. Realistically, g5 is still playable, but I think I was going for g5 myself here as well. And as we see after h3, I did end up playing g5. But things are a little difficult here. After f5, I think this was not actually the right move. I think I might have had an advantage here after the move rook to h1. Where rook to h1, king to g2, and then rook to e1, I can attack the e-pawn. Takes, rook d7, rook a7, and I should be able to take, and maybe there's an advantage here, though it's nearly non-existent. I would say it's impossible to actually prove anything here at all, but maybe that was possible to go for. But instead, I went for rook e1 immediately, and my opponent traded. And this is just a draw now. After rook takes e2, king takes e2, I played f6. This is the only realistic move in the position. Otherwise, it's going to take too long to move my king this way. That's way too many moves. But f6 liquidates these pawns off the board, and so they have less space. And after takes, yeah, this is even. But it's still tricky. After king d3, king d5, a3, and b5, things are still okay. They can play king c3. That is realistically pretty much the only try. And if I go king c5, then king d3, right? And there's not really too much here. King d5. But what if king c3, king to e4? This is where things get interesting, actually. Right after king to e4, king b4, king to f3, king takes b5, king to g2 or g3, it doesn't really matter. B4, king takes h3, king to a6, king takes g4, king takes a7 or b5, doesn't matter. And then king to f5, or well, a5 unfortunately is also just drawing, but b5, h4, push, 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 and promote. And as we can see here, this is just a draw. But it just takes a lot of calculating to get there. But that was unfortunate. And then we see the move b4. And b4, after king to d5 and king to d3, it's unfortunately losing now. And it's because of a key move in this position, a6. Where after a6, I am threatening to go either to e4 or to c4. And I have the opposition now, as I can waste a move. Surprisingly, especially in endgames, wasting moves can be a very big theme, because everything about the endgames are about opposition, at least pawn endings. Opposition is a huge thing where you actually want your opponent to move, because this is something called zugzwang, as well as opposition, where no matter what move your opponent makes, it worsens their position. If they could pass in this move, or in this position, they'd actually be okay. If this was black to move, they're fine. King to e5, just king to e3, right? It's a draw. But here, unfortunately, they have to move. But they play king b3, but now king d4, and we just enter their position, and now we can shoulder them away from protecting the pawn. If king to a3 here, then just king to c3, and this is another example of zugzwang, where now they have to play king a2, and we win the pawn. But instead, just king c2. I took the pawn and king d4. I didn't even bother to start pushing. I just went to the other side of the board. Was going to take those pawns, and this is winning. And my opponent in this position ended up resigning. So the moral of the story, or the position here, is, well, be careful in your endgames. I would say make sure you don't make weakening moves. b4 is very natural, but it just simply wasn't necessary. King d3, there is no entry on b4 here, so this would have been okay. But that's an easy mistake to make, because b4 comes with check, and I no longer have the c5 square. But unfortunately, as we saw, there was a zugzwang. So anyways, now I have won. This is the 7th game in a row, I believe, that I've won. Maybe 8th. Yes. Anyways, I'm on a streak now, and yeah, I've won about 7 or 8 games in a row. Things are looking up, but there is still a few games to go in this tournament. There are still, I believe, 3 more. This was round 2, and I'm just hoping for some equally good luck next time around. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in game 3.